It didn't take Arsenal long to get back on level terms though, 11 minutes in fact, as Andrei Arshavin crossed for Robin van Persie to volley the equaliser. In a superb second half, Arsenal looked the more likely winners. But with extra time looming, Zigic flicked the ball on for substitute Obafemi Martins. The Nigerian, who'd only been on the pitch 6 minutes, took advantage of miscommunication in the Arsenal defence to win the League Cup for his side. Contrasting emotions at the final whistle for Birmingham manager Alex McLeish and his Arsenal counterpart Arsene Wenger, as Arsenal's 6-year trophy drought continues. But Birmingham's players and fans won't care about that as they celebrate their club's first major trophy in almost 50 years. Guy McCree, Al Jazeera.
England's Luke Donald has moved up to 3rd in the world rankings after beating new world #1 Martin Keimer of Germany in the final of the WGC Match Play Championship on Sunday. The Englishman was 3 shots up early on before Keimer pulled it back to all square by the halfway stage, but Donald came back again to win the 11th, 12th and 15th hole to restore his 3-shot lead. The Englishman eventually completing a 3-2 victory on the 16th hole. To NBA, where the San Antonio Spurs beat the Memphis Grizzlies at 95-88 after a thrilling match on Sunday. The Spurs overcame the loss of Tony Parker, who was sidelined by an injury. So it was all up to Manu Ginobili to save his team. Ginobili scored 18 of his season-high 35 points in the 4th quarter, rallying the Spurs to the win. That's all sport from me. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much indeed, Sana. Now, the Oscars, the best showcase of the best in the film industry, and Hollywood film stars, producers, directors, pretty much everybody who could fit onto a red carpet turned up in style for the Oscars at the Kodak Theatre in Los Angeles. Sadly, well, they never say they're sad when they lose, do they? Just say how wonderful it is to be there. But sadly, there were only a few winners. Biggest winner of the night, The King's Speech, Best Film, Best Actor, and a few awards for The Social Network too.
Hello again. The flooding rains are still with us through many parts of South America. If we take a look at the satellite picture, it's a little jumpy, but you can make out this huge area of cloud here just in the southern parts of Brazil, and more wet weather all along this western coast here. Heavy downpours down into Lima. So we've got yet more wet weather to come then as we head through the next few days. There could be more in the way of localised flooding, yet more wet weather all the way from that western coast all the way down towards Rio. To the south of that, though, it's generally a lot drier, and it won't be quite as hot as it has been either. So Buenos Aires this time getting to around 27 degrees. Now, if we head towards Cape Town here, it's actually going to be a bit hotter than it has been. Looks like our temperature will be right up at a sticky 34 degrees as we head through Tuesday. Elsewhere, it's also going to be warm, but not that hot. 28 there in Durban. The showers there still stretching from Madagascar all the way across through Mozambique and across towards Angola. Some heavy ones at that. A little bit further north, and the wettest weather here seems to be through parts of Pakistan and across into Afghanistan as well. Heavy downpours and a lot of snow there as you head into the northern parts of India as well. We've just got the tail end of that here in Doha. A fresher day, I think, for us on Tuesday. The wind's quite brisk and from the north.
Qatar, through Qatar Petroleum and its partners, has been adopting ambitious plans aimed to expand its exports of natural gas in its liquefied form into remote international markets and to supply piped gas to regional markets. In implementing those plans, Qatar has been benefiting from its strategic geographic location and the relatively low cost of producing gas from its territories. Qatar Petroleum.
The son of the Libyan leader says it's calm in the capital, but news of protesters on Tripoli streets say otherwise. Also reports that Gaddafi's son is arming his supporters to fight back. Hello, I'm Shili Ghosh. You're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also in this programme, the United Nations in crisis mode. Western leaders meeting in Geneva say Gaddafi must go. Banned from travel and his assets seized. Egypt's top prosecutor makes a move on the ousted President Hosni Mubarak. And saying no to a unity government. Yemen's opposition turns down an offer from the president. Well, it's being reported that fresh protests against Muammar Gaddafi have broken out in the Libyan capital of Tripoli, with reports of security forces opening fire. That comes as international pressure mounts over the ongoing unrest. European Union ministers in Brussels have agreed to slap their own sanctions on the country's leadership to back up the measures already announced by the UN. And Libya also topped the agenda at a meeting of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. But as the diplomats talk, more people are risking their lives in protests. Lawrence Lee reports on the resistance growing throughout the country.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that if a town only half an hour from Tripoli is in the hands of protesters with tanks, then the end must surely be near. Yet the days drift by, momentum ebbs and flows, and for the time being Gaddafi's regime has enough to avoid falling to the people's uprising. Given the routine way in which Gaddafi's armed forces have been switching allegiances over the last few days, one of the questions that keeps being raised is how are the Gaddafis maintaining a fighting force? Up until now, the chief spokesman for Gaddafi has been his son, Saif al-Islam. He has routinely accused the media of lying about the fighting, maintaining Libya is entirely at peace with itself.
The point that you are hearing rumors, false reports, please take your camera tomorrow morning, even this night, go to every city in Libya. Everything is calm, everything is peaceful.
And yet this has now emerged. The same man, semi-automatic in hand, exhorting people to fight for his father.
I'm here to raise your morale. They are spreading rumours that our police and security forces are joining the hooligans. It's not true. Today we'll show them that the police are siding with Libya. I'm bringing you reinforcements, resources, food, weapons, everything you need.
Discounting the irony that Saif al-Islam Gaddafi has warned about the prospects of civil war while seeming to arm a militia is the question of the extent of Gaddafi's regular military forces. This is the Bainin air base, said to be one of the most important in the country. The military here say they've joined the uprising.
The whole base responded to my call to join the People's Revolution. We have great staff. As military personnel, we want to be clear that this is not a military coup. We are not leading anything. This is a people's revolution led by the youth. Our role is to protect and support it. That's our main aim.
While the Gaddafis offer arms to civilians, their former army in eastern Libya has left behind a fearsome arsenal, now in the hands of the insurgency. They say they're trying to look after it in case children get their hands on it. It also promises to provide them with a massive buffer against the Gaddafi fight back. So the east of the country does now appear far more stable, and attempts are being made to suggest a country after Gaddafi. But there's still nervousness about a civil war, not least among poor migrant workers who, many days after their bosses, are finally getting out.
Here is facing war and here is going on war, so we are afraid, everybody is afraid here, what maybe we can die and die.
Away from the headline towns, it appears that little places are quietly realigning themselves, and in a small country that could be genuinely significant. This Facebook video is said to be from Zintan, southwest of Tripoli, near the Tunisian border. Enough men with arms here to protect a fuel convoy. And this video, also from Facebook, is from a tiny-looking place called Kakla al-Jabal. They raise the flag of protest here unnoticed, but it's another community lost to Gaddafi. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Hoda Abdelhamid is in the city of Benghazi. Hoda, Benghazi is very much the rebel stronghold. What are the plans there?
Well, the plans here are at the moment to try to keep the gains that are in place, the territorial gains, try to protect the city. At the same time, trying to sort of kickstart some sort of local governments first, and also some sort of national dialogue, which would pave the way really to have dialogue or any sort of contact with the international community, as well as paving the way for maybe an interim government if the regime falls. Certainly at the moment, however, everybody is in a sort of hold pattern, waiting to see what is happening next, whether there will be a counter-offensive or whether they will be whether there will be the fall of Gaddafi. So really at the moment I really would describe it as an effort to try to bring some normalcy while being very, very cautious about the future.
So as far as moving the fight to Tripoli goes, I mean, that's very difficult, isn't it? Because the surrounding areas are still in the hands of pro-Gaddafi loyalists.
Absolutely. I mean, we do hear about lots of efforts and calls of people trying to organize themselves, military commanders who say they would lead an offensive towards Tripoli. But in reality, it is an extremely difficult mission. They would have to go through Sirte, the homeland of Gaddafi. That's where most of the paramilitary elite forces are based. That city, as we understand it, is completely fortified, and fortified well before the city, about 40 kilometers in each direction around the city, and then they would have to continue to Tripoli. Now, reaching Tripoli, even between Sirte and Tripoli, is quite difficult because, as we understand it there, the government is doing its best to make sure that both east gateways and west gateways of Tripoli do not remain under the hand of the opposition.
Now, as far as the humanitarian situation goes there, Hoda, France has said that it's going to send 2 plane loads of aid to Benghazi, and there's obviously moves afoot for a huge humanitarian operation to come into force. How much is that needed where you are and in other areas?
Well, I think it's very, very much needed, especially when it comes to medical aid. I mean, most of the nurses and the doctors in this country were foreigners who actually left with that wave of foreigners escaping, really, the violence that happened here. There is a lack of medicine, there's a lack of blood supplies, as one aid worker already in the country told me, and there's a lack of expertise. And now there's also food supplies are running low. So certainly any kind of aid will be very welcome. People here in Benghazi say that once the ports start working again, even though if it's not full capacity, that would help a lot. But they certainly say that there is a need to, from Benghazi, dispatch that aid to the rest of the country and to countries that have sort of more deep inland and who would have a much more difficult time to get access to any kind of supplies or aid.
Hoda, thanks for that update. Hoda Abdulhamid reporting from Benghazi there. Well, the US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has called for Libya's Colonel Gaddafi to go immediately in an address to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. She offered a long list of human rights violations committed by the Gaddafi regime and said the people of Libya had spoken.
Colonel Gaddafi and those around him must be held accountable for these acts, which violate international legal obligations and common decency. Through their actions, they have lost the legitimacy to govern. And the people of Libya have made themselves clear. It is time for Gaddafi to go, now, without further violence or delay.
Let's go to Washington, D.C. and join Patty Culhane. Patty, a very strong speech from Hillary Clinton there. She was saying that the Human Rights Council had to act decisively and move away from what she called tired rhetoric.
she was very critical in saying basically this organization needs to be able to respond in real time. Of course, there are those, especially in Washington, that are critical of the Obama administration because really it took about 9 days before they really did weigh in, before we saw the president speak, before we saw any of that tough language. Now here in Washington, administration officials say basically they were waiting until their diplomats and Americans who wanted to get out of Libya could get out. The moment that the plane was, as they call it around here, wheels, feet wet, basically, the plane was safe, then they began to talk about sanctions and use some tough language.
Oh, and Clinton's saying that, that nothing is off the table.